Hello, gazers.
Hello, gazers. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Dr. Lee. How are you?
Very good.
You're looking very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed today.
Thank you. I feel very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So do you.
Thank you. Well, I've just been for a nice massage.
Lovely.
Lovely Tina pummeled and pounded me. I've been pounded to within an inch of my life.
Lovely.
Which is good, by Tina's fair hands.
By Tina's fair hands.
Yeah, she's quite brutal, is Tina.
Right.
Well, she's like gentle and brutal at the same time.
My perfect boyfriend.
I don't think Tina's your type, to be honest, even though she is lovely. Oh, I feel lovely. So hence why I'm sat here hunched and bunched. Obviously, Tina would despair of me if she saw how I was sat now.
Yeah, she would. Like a coiled spring.
Yeah, but I found, I was talking to Tina about it, in summer, you kind of be out and about, in the garden, well, I'm anyway, always like up and down, doing things and stuff. So your back gets exercise and it strengthens your back as well. But whereas in winter, what do? Sit on the couch, watch telly. Don't sit on the couch very well for our skeletons and our muscles and things.
I do Pilates.
I know you do, you smug bastard.
So I haven't got any of your back problems, darling.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, well, that's nice for you, isn't it? How wonderful. During lockdown, did yoga every day.
Yes.
Loved it. Now, I could spend half an hour in the morning doing a yoga session, stretching fully out, strengthening everything. What do I do instead? Sit over a cup of coffee, scrolling through shit on TikTok.
Wow.
I'm 50 years old. I shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. I need to have a word with myself.
Have a word with yourself.
Yes. Anyway, before we do anything else...
Yes.
If you're listening to this podcast, well done. You've obviously got extremely good taste in podcasts.
And a vibrant life.
Ready to learn history, popular culture. And culture. And news. And
current affairs.
And love dissecting various TV programmes, films.
Yes.
And appreciate having an academic slant aimed towards it.
Yes.
And listening to two old puffs chatting shit. That's
two old puffs.
That's obviously up your street too. Anyway, if you are listening to it and you like it, hit that follow button. Let's get our followers up.
Yes, please follow us and tell your friends. Take their phones and follow us on their phones for you. Can I just interject? Last night your dog gave me a fart blowback.
Please explain.
Look, I was on the sofa, one of your dogs, which shall remain nameless, I don't want to point fingers, Frank.
Don't want to fart shame him.
He snuggled in, just closing my eyes for a little doze, and he let off a silent bomb straight in the vicinity of my mouth. And I literally inhaled it. And it was one of the most gippiest moments of my entire life.
Oh, dear.
So, fart blowback from Frank.
Poor Frank.
Don't poor Frank. I was the one that could taste it. It was minging.
Well, you should know by now.
You should have that dog under control.
Not have his bum anywhere in the vicinity of your face.
I know now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I thought it was really sweet the way he snuggled in. Little did I realise he was about to gift me something from beyond the grave.
Something from down below. The pit of hell. Okay, that's enough about farts, please. So, Bridget Jones last week.
Yes.
It's gone down very well.
Yes, it has.
Yes, after the word from Shirley to kind of rein it in a little bit. I thought we did very well. We're very balanced, very nuanced.
I think so.
Had a very good dissection of the Bridget Jones phenomenon from 2001. Now, obviously, jump forward to 2025. Mad About the Boy has been released on Valentine's Day. So have you seen it yet? Let us know. We haven't seen it, have we?
No. Are you going to go to the cinema?
No. I'll wait for it to come on,
on video.
Streaming and stuff, video and stuff.
Yes.
There was quite an interesting article in the Metro from the director of the latest instalment.
Right.
Because, last week we talked about Bridget Jones and in particular Renee Zellweger's weight was a big issue in the first films. It was, it was part of the story, wasn't it? About her constantly calorie counting, looking for her weight, and Renee Zellweger herself gained 20 pounds to play the role, and
then had panic attacks trying to get the weight off.
And then actually I read that she put it back on again for the sequel. And the director of this film saying that he didn't see Bridget's weight as being an issue. It doesn't play a part in proceedings. And he did go on to say, now, I just felt like I don't think it needs to be part of the conversation with her. She's got so many other things she's frazzled about. She's not paying attention to certain things. So what he's basically saying is, now Bridget is in her 50s, she no longer worries about her weight, or her weight isn't one of her priorities. Don't quite know how I feel about that statement, about what it says about women in their 50s.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that it means she's very secure in her own body now, but I suspect it doesn't mean that.
I think it's to do with the fact that in the early 2000s, which we talked about in What Not to Wear, Love Actually, there was a lot of talk about weight and women's weight in movies, wasn't there? And you could very easily be watching a movie and a woman was called fat or made fun of because of her weight. So that was very much in the public conversation at the time, and people's attitudes towards women and their weight. It's a bit passé now, isn't it? To kind of comment upon a woman's weight in a movie these days would be frowned upon. People wouldn't have absorbed it and consumed it, having no issue with it, which I think they would now.
Yeah, well, we talked about this last week, didn't we? That you can't do fat jokes anymore because it's not funny anymore. But interestingly, similar kind of bent, I saw somebody was having a go at Cyndi Lauper, 71 years old, on stage, giving it jip, and some bloke, as you can imagine, said, "What's happened to Cyndi Lauper?" And it's like, for God's sake, she's 71. What? Are you going to be able to still give it jip when you're 71? If you can, fair enough. If you can't, shut the fuck up.
What is it about people who can't seem to accept that women age?
I know. Well, it's a Pamela Anderson no makeup thing again, isn't it? The shocker of it. Yeah. The horror. But was it ever thus, David? Go back to witchcraft trials of the 16th century. Women of a certain age, who weren't married especially, are often persecuted, regarded with suspicion, derision, all this stuff, because they're no longer functioning women, because they can't have babies anymore. Anyway, let's not the blood boil already. We are celebrating LGBTQ History Month.
We are?
Yes, which is obviously a month which shines a light on forgotten histories which were hidden deliberately or hidden unconsciously. And as two puffs of a certain age, we are flying the flag.
We're flying the flag.
Yes, we are. Our rainbow flag. And we are looking today at a seminal piece of television, taking the TARDIS back to 1975, as we examine The Naked Civil Servant, which was broadcast by ITV on the 17th of December, 1975. I don't know if a lot of people have heard of it, actually, these days, but it was a groundbreaking piece of telly. It's on YouTube. Stop what you're doing, go and watch it. It's an hour and 15 minutes, then come back.
It's about the life of Quentin Crisp, isn't it?
It is, yes. Quentin Crisp was, back in the day, a kind of raconteur. This actually made him famous, this dramatisation of his autobiography, which tells his story of being a openly homosexual, flamboyantly camp man in the 1930s, 1940s.
It's not necessarily a controversial piece if you look at it these days, but certainly at the time, even though it was kind of heaped with praise from critics, must have been quite an unusual programme for the casual viewer to watch, on primetime ITV.
Yeah, well, it's the first time viewers are seeing gay men in bed together. And as we've discussed, still to this day, the gay best friend trope of Bridget Jones last week, gay men are very rarely, until relatively recently, shown to have a sex life or to have a personal life or to have a life. So this was beamed into TVs in 1975. Must have blown people's minds. And I'll tell you how much of a cultural impact it made. My parents wouldn't have watched it, but certainly when I was a kid, the name Quentin Crisp was a household name. That's how much of an impact it had made. He'd become part of the social currency. Have you got any relationships with The Naked Civil Servant?
I've never seen it.
Right.
But like you say, The Naked Civil Servant and Quentin Crisp, I know about them. Particularly I know that this film was very celebrated at the time, and that Quentin Crisp was a sort of a pioneer in a way, wasn't he, of the gay rights movement, not necessarily involved in the gay rights movement, but as being a gay figure that everyone kind of knows.
Yes.
That's about it, really, I have to say. I'm quite ashamed to say I didn't really know that much about him.
I was the same as you. I remember him being on TV as a kid, and I remember if gay characters came on television, rarely, but my dad would say, "Oh, there, he's a Quentin Crisp." So he becomes a noun.
Right, yes.
And then I saw this, over 10 years ago, maybe 2012, I first saw The Naked Civil Servant. I loved it. I'd wanted to watch it for ages. partly because it was executive produced by Verity Lambert, first producer of Doctor Who, and she always made really interesting telly. Partly because through my mate Jacqueline Pearce, who was really old pals with John Hurt, and having been to, I don't want to name drop, but having been to John Hurt's house a couple of times, he had like a framed picture of him as Quentin Crisp in drag in the spare bedroom I was in. There was a sketch of Quentin Crisp. I can't remember if it had been done by Quentin Crisp, but it said at the bottom of it, "Thank you for making me an icon." It was a sketch of John Hurt as Quentin Crisp. It said, "Thank you for making me an icon, Quentin Crisp." And I remember thinking, wow, that's a piece of history right there. So I was really pleased to watch it again. And I'm thrilled that we are doing LGBTQ history.
Yes.
For LGBTQ History Month. But remember, Dave, what about straight history? Right.
Shall I give a little kind of little lowdown about what The Naked Civil Servant, the film, is?
Yes, do.
Okay, so The Naked Civil Servant, it's a 1975 made-for-television biographical comedy drama directed by Jack Gold, produced, as you said, by Verity Lambert. And it was adapted for film by Philip Mackey, and it was based on Quentin Crisp's 1968 book of the same name. So it stars John Hurt as Quentin Crisp, alongside Patricia Hodge and John Rhys-Davies. It was produced by Thames Television and broadcast on the 17th of December 1975 on ITV. For his performance, John Hurt won the BAFTA for Best Actor in 1976. And in 2000, the film was placed 4th in a poll by industry professionals to find the BFI TV 100 of the 20th century. So 4th in the top 100.
Yeah, some pedigree, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. So that's it in a nutshell. We'll deep dive into it a little bit later on. Yeah. But what are we going to do next?
I think we should cross the news desk, Dave, and find out what was happening in 1975.
Okay, let's gather your things. Come on, let's go. Let's have a little walk over to... Are you settled?
Yes.
The news desk.
So, on the 11th of February 1975, Margaret Thatcher defeats Edward Heath in the Conservative Party leadership election and becomes the party's first female leader. She'd previously been Education Secretary, famously known as Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, after stopping free milk at school for kiddies. And then obviously 4 years after this, she's going to become the first female PM.
Have you watched Margaret and Brian, I think it's called?
No, I want to watch it.
Yeah, so it's Harriet Walter
and Steve Coogan, isn't it?
Yeah, stars as Margaret Thatcher, and then Steve Coogan stars as Brian Walden, which was who was a famous interviewer at the time.
Yeah.
And he interviewed Margaret Thatcher on several occasions throughout her premiership, and then very famously interviewed her towards the end of her premiership and basically laid into her, and she saw it was a kind of a betrayal. Because a short time after that, she was deposed as leader, and she never spoke to him again.
Wow, gosh.
Yeah, it's great, actually.
Is it good?
It's a good piece of little drama, actually. I'd recommend it. Right. Okay, so on the 28th of February 1975, the Moorgate tube crash kills 43 people.
Yeah. That was grim. Yeah. I think it overshot its brakes or something. It's why they now have automatic brake systems, I think, because it just didn't brake in time and then hit a wall. Imagine 43 people killed on the tube. Gosh. Terrible. Yeah. In another edition of The More Things Change, The More They Stay the Same, on the 25th of March, a large National Front rally is held in London. Can you guess what they were protesting about, Dave?
Could it have been about foreigners?
Yes, probably, yes. It was a protest against European integration.
Oh.
Because that year...
67% of voters support continuing membership of the EEC in a referendum.
Yeah, on the 5th of June, there's a referendum, and 67% of people want to stay in it. Mm-hmm. There's a very famous picture of Margaret Thatcher wearing a jumper with all the flags of the EU members in it. And whenever certain types in the Brexit referendum would say, well, Thatcher would have wanted out, it's like, actually, no, she didn't. She really recognised the value of being part of it. On the 5th of July, a 36-year-old Keighley woman, Anne Rogulski, I'm really sorry about my pronunciation, is badly injured in a hammer attack, probably done by Peter Sutcliffe. And then October, they find the body of Wilma McCann in Leeds, who later becomes known as Peter Sutcliffe's first victim. So 75 is when all that starts.
Just beginning. It's going to go on for 7 or 8 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Okay. In nicer news, 31st of October, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody is released.
Gosh. Still one of the biggest songs ever, isn't it?
Speaking of Freddie Mercury in LGBT History Month.
Yeah. He was a gay.
He was a gay, wasn't he?
That's history. Yeah. Right, that'll do.
Yeah.
A bit of a seminal moment, pop culture-wise, on the 6th of November, when the first public performance by the punk rock band The Sex Pistols takes place. Now, they were a bit of a media invention, weren't they, the Sex Pistols? Virgin Records, I believe, was one of their first acts and kind of makes Virgin's name.
I see.
Very much a press thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, they used and abused the media, didn't they?
Absolutely.
I mean, it was very performative, wasn't it, the Sex Pistols?
Yes.
Designed to shock.
Yes, absolutely. But again, it also was representing an anger that was very current among younger people, because I think unemployment's hit 1.5 million this year. I know I'm researching this book I'm writing at the minute. I've come to realise that the 60s, 70s, and to an extent the 80s, it's just one crisis after another. And really, in retrospect, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. It's one sterling crisis, one economic crisis, unemployment's out of control, inflation is out of control, inflation will spiral in the late 70s. Nothing's changed. The year ends on an optimistic note on the 29th of December, when the Sex Discrimination Act 1975 and the Equal Pay Act, which was taken 5 years to get passed, comes into force, aiming to end the unequal pay of men and women in the workplace. How do you think that's gone,
That
Dave?
went really well.
Really well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not complaining.
No. I don't know what people are complaining about,
I don't
honestly.
know.
Yeah. I mean, it shows you, doesn't it, that no matter how much you can bring in statutes, you can bring in new laws and things like the Race Relations Act, Race Discrimination Act, culture itself can take a big time to change. So that was some of the events of 1975.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Busy year.
Busy year.
Yeah. What was going on in the TV landscape?
Well, there are some notable debuts.
That's spooky, to be honest with you, because what were we watching last night? The Good Life.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, you were. Yeah. And lo and behold.
This debuts, yes, The Good Life debuts on the 4th of April on BBC One.
Also that year that debuts is Survivors, which is the Terry Nation apocalypse after a plague has wiped out humanity, which ends up being a lot of talk about cottage gardening, to be fair, and how you grow broad beans.
Yes.
But The Good Life and Survivors are two sides of this coin, which is all about it's not New Age, but it's organics movements is coming in, growing your own veg, recognising that pollution is destroying the planet. It's all part of the green movement, which is really taking shape at this time. So, and The Good Life does spark a trend for people growing their own and getting back to nature and stuff. Another big hitter on 19th of September, Fawlty Towers has its debut on BBC Two.
Yes.
I never knew that. I always thought it was BBC One.
Well, it was probably a new comedy which they weren't too sure about.
Yeah, probably alternative at that point,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
very alternative.
Yeah.
We took a deep dive into Fawlty Towers, didn't we, in one of our previous episodes?
Yeah.
Please look that up,
Yeah.
gazers. 1st of September, Angels. Now, that was a kind of like TV nursing drama, wasn't it?
Created by Julia Smith.
Yes.
Who will then go on to create EastEnders, obviously. Also cut her teeth directing Doctor Who. One of the very few female Doctor Who directors of the classic series.
I see.
Yeah, it was a twice-weekly soap, I think. And the BBC didn't really do soaps at that point. They were a bit sniffy about them. So this was a bit of a thing. Lots of actors started on Angels. In October, Paddington begins.
Oh, Paddington. I mean, I used to watch the old Paddingtons. I've not seen any of the new Paddington movies, have you?
Yeah, they're great.
Are they?
I love them.
Are they?
I absolutely love them. Yeah.
Oh, I might have to watch
My
that.
cynical old heart absolutely loves them.
In January 1975, the Sweeney debuts.
Right. Another Verity Lambert show.
Was that?
Yeah.
Was that John Thor?
Yes, John Thor. Dennis Waterman. Sweeney Todd. It was named after the Flying Squad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Another groundbreaking show, because until that point, cop shows had been very comfortable and safe. Zed Cars, Dixon of Dock Green had presented the image of the policeman as this benevolent figure. The Sweeney shows them as smoking, drinking, swearing. It was a huge hit.
1st of April, Edward VII. I don't know what that is.
That is Edward Fox, and it's a dramatisation of Wallace Simpson and Edward VII and the abdication crisis, and was a big show that year. And again, it's a product of the time when the royals were still kind of untouchable and distant. So this was a proper peeling back the facade, I guess. 4th of September, Space 1999.
I've not seen that.
Oh, when I was a kid, I loved it. I used to have the little toy spaceship. It was basically how they thought 1999 was going to look in 1975, which means everyone's in fabulous jumpsuits.
Oh, If only.
Yeah, if only. God, so we got Juicy Couture. Little did they realise. Some other things going on in 1975 on the telly. BBC One in February begins showing Little House on the Prairie.
That was a big one.
Yeah.
Little House on the Prairie reminds me of going up to my grandma's for Sunday lunch.
Yes.
It was always on a Sunday morning, wasn't
That's
it?
right,
I didn't really get on with Little House on the Prairie. I was more a Walton's man myself.
See, both of them made me nauseous. Yeah.
Just about Lost in Space. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. That
Land of the Giants.
Yeah, they were later on, though. They were repeats from the 60s. I quite like those, yeah. 17th of March, BBC One begins showing the Hanna-Barbera cartoon series, Hong Kong Phooey. Loved that.
Number one super guy.
Number one super guy. Ever more Superfly, is it as well? Yeah.
Yes.
Fucking great.
Yeah. Hong Kong Phooey was great. Okay, so on the 13th of August, BBC One begins showing the US detective series, The Rockford Files, starring James Garner. Never seen it.
My dad was a fan. I just remember for that Saturday night telly thing, it was like Starsky and Hutch or The Rockford Files. It was a grown-up show, but it was a big thing.
You got to remember, this is our mum and dad's, what they were watching when we were like wee nippers just crawling around and shitting our nappies.
Yes,
weren't they, in
much.
1975?
Yeah, let's had a glimpse of the past or a glimpse of the future.
Yeah. Have you got your nappy on?
Checking. Yes, I have.
Yes, good.
On the 2nd of September, Run Around!
Oh, Mike Reed.
Yeah, the long-running children's game show hosted by Mike Reed, his first broadcast on ITV.
Was he a big star then?
Yeah, he was a stand-up.
Yeah.
And he was a regular in those dreadful stand-up shows called The Comedians.
Yes, I remember
he was one of those, yeah. Also a bit part player in Doctor Who in the late 60s, yeah. He's often a Yeti or a unit soldier, pops up, yeah.
Later, obviously, Frank Butcher in EastEnders. Yeah. Yeah, and then the 9th of December, the 15th anniversary of the first episode of Coronation Street, currently in its 60th.
Yeah, it's 3 years older than Doctor Who, so it's 65 this year.
65?
Yeah.
I've got a nice bottle of gin downstairs that I got given as being part of the 60th year of Coronation Street in my capacity as director.
That's nice.
Yes.
On the 17th of December, the final episode of the sitcom Till Death Us Do Part is broadcast on BBC One. If you'd like to know more about Till Death Us Do Part, you can catch our earlier episode a couple of weeks ago when we discussed that very show.
Yeah. Okay, so then on the 25th of December, as part of the Christmas Day highlights, BBC One screens the UK television premiere of the 1939 MGM fantasy musical The Wizard of Oz, starring Judy Garland. The film will go on to be shown regularly on the BBC during the Christmas period until the 1990s. Now, I remember The Wizard of Oz being on Christmas Day and looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, me too. It was one of those, became a regular in the schedule, didn't it? You'd expect it at Christmas time. And like The Sound of Music, one of those films I never watched through, but you saw enough chunks of it to be able to piece it all together.
Me and you obviously strangely drawn to Judy Garland wearing ruby red slippers.
I can't think why.
I can't understand it.
Can't understand it. There's an amazing bit I found out. You know the bit where it transitions from black and white to colour? They didn't have the technology to do the screen, so they build a set that looks sepia.
Yeah.
Have Judy Garland's body double and clothes that are designed to be black and white. So it's actually filmed in colour, but they've created this set so when she opens the door, it's still the same colour cameras rolling. I mean, that's just phenomenal, isn't it?
It was the black and white Judy Garland was an extra.
Yes.
Opened the door, and as the camera swept through the door into the colour world, then the real Judy Garland in her colour outfit
it's amazing.
Swept into view.
It's sweet.
I played the Tin Man once.
So did I.
Yeah. And my line was, "I'm the Tin Man and I want a heart."
Is that all you said?
Yeah.
The whole play?
Yeah.
Wow, you got shortchanged with that one. Because I was the Tin Man in Morpeth Panto Society's production.
Oh, is that when you fainted just before you went on? I got a nosebleed.
That was Robinson Crusoe the year before.
Oh.
Yeah, did all the songs.
The perils of being an actor.
Honestly.
So, let's have a look at what was in the UK pop charts. Week commencing the 14th of December 1975. Green Green Grass of Home, Elvis Presley, number 30. Small Faces, HQ Park, number 28.
A re-release of that, yeah. That's interesting, yeah.
Oh.
That was originally in the 60s, I think.
Of course it was, yeah.
Love Hurt Jim Capaldi. I wonder if it's a relation to Lewis.
Or Peter.
The
Capaldis, they're very talented.
Very
family,
talented. Very talented.
Very
family.
artistic.
Very
roots.
artistic family. 24. Ken Dodd. Think of me wherever you are. Is it funny that Ken Dodd had a lot of music recordings?
I think I went to see Ken Dodd when I was a kid.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh, it might have been Keith Harris Norville.
Question. Did he have a puppet, bird, or a tickling stick?
I can't remember now.
Okay. Your pal David Essex at number 21,
yes.
if I could.
Hi, David, if you're listening.
Hi, David. Blue eyes. Dana. It's going to be a cold Christmas, number 18.
Dana.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it's December.
Yes, it is. Week before Christmas.
Oh.
Yeah. Renter Santa.
By Chris Hill at number 11. Don't know that one.
Another Christmas classic.
Oh.
Lost to Time.
I think you might need to scroll a bit faster because there's not much going on. Oh, Golden Years. David Bowie, number 8.
Yeah.
Great song there.
The Stylistics at number 7. Nana is the saddest word.
Let's Twist Again. / The Twist by Chubby Checker at number 6. That was obviously a re-release,
Yeah. Happy to be on an island in the sun with Demis Roussos at number 5.
What was the attraction of Demis Roussos?
I think it was just he was exotic because he was Greek.
Oh, right,
and
yes.
Large and used to wear a kaftan.
Greek was foreign back then, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes. The world was a much bigger place.
Yes. Although, from the late 60s, you're getting a lot of Brits now going abroad to Europe for their holidays and coming back with exotic things like olive oil and garlic. I mean, we've just been abroad. Look what everybody eats over there.
And everyone's like, oh, don't be bringing that foreign muck over here. Can't live without it now.
Can't live without it. Can't buy it. It's too fucking expensive.
Yeah, no. But the olive oil.
Don't get me started. Oh, number 4. That's a good one.
You sexy thing.
Yeah. And the song is?
You sexy thing. Hot chocolate, number 4.
Number 4. He was a big sex symbol for white women, Errol Brown.
Yeah?
Lots of white women used to fancy Errol Brown.
Well, he used to wear them kind of tight-fitting jumpsuits, didn't he?
He was tiny, though.
Was he?
He was a tiny little man.
How tall?
I think
was
he's like
he?
5'6", 5'7".
Oh,
yeah.
You wouldn't think so.
You
It's
wouldn't.
the magic of television.
Magic of television. Magic
Do a
of
low
television.
shot. Everyone looks tall.
Yeah. Betty Davis used to say that she thought everybody... Because you always think people on telly are taller than they actually are.
Yeah.
And her theory was that it's because, as you say, you tend to be filmed just head to waist.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives everybody the impression that...
Yeah.
Anyway...
Trick of the trade.
That's a good one. Number 3, I Believe in Father Christmas, Greg Lake.
That's still played.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's a bit dirgy, isn't it?
It's a bit dirgy, but it's one of the few ones I like because I like a melancholic song at Christmas.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, you're a bit of a Grinch, aren't you?
I'm not a Grinch. I just don't believe in the capitalism of it all. And what's number 1? You ready?
Okay, straight in at number 1.
This is going to be the Christmas number 1 of 1975.
Oh, okay.
Oh, is it? No, it's not. That's the week after. The week before Christmas, it's going to be... Of course it is. Bohemian Rhapsody.
Classic. I'm just a small boy from a small family.
Scaramouche, shall we do the fandango?
Don't get fresh.
So before we look at the Naked Civil Servant itself, I thought it would be quite interesting and relevant just to do a little potted history of what was happening with LGBTQ rights in Britain at the time this was produced. Because actually in the 8 years before this was produced, it's been a huge time in terms of lots of different movements. We touched earlier on about the Green Movement, women's liberation movement's really been having its go in the last couple of years, and as has the LGBTQ movement. Stemming from 1967, when 10 years after the publication of the Wolfenden Report, which recommends that homosexuality be decriminalised, in 1967, homosexuality is finally decriminalised, and it decriminalises homosexual acts between 2 men over the age of 21 years, but in private. And that whole private-public thing is really going to come into conversation when we talk about the Naked Civil Servant. But yeah, I remember our thing on Victim, one of our early episodes, and talking about the kind of illegality of being gay, So finally... 1967, the year of our Ghana episode, it was permissible to be homosexual.
Yeah, so if anybody hasn't listened to our episode on the film Victim from 1960, which was one of the first British films to depict gay people sympathetically I'd thoroughly recommend you go back and listen to that if you want to go more in depth on that period of time.
Yeah.
In 1969, the Campaign for Homosexual Equality, CHE, is formed as the first British gay activist group.
And then a year later, the Gay Liberation Front was established at the London School of Economics in response to the debates that many gay and lesbian people were having at the time about how they were treated by society. The formation of the Gay Liberation Front has also been influenced by Stonewall Rebellion in the USA that started on the 28th of June 1969, which really pulls the kind of gay genie out of the bottle and it's not go back in.
Yeah.
So
very, very significant at moment in time, the Stonewall riots, weren't they?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And very apt for the modern world, really, the way that trans people are being persecuted, particularly in the US of A.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, in 1970, on the 27th of November, 150 members of the Gay Liberation Front held a torchlight rally in Highbury Fields to protest against the continual harassment of the gay community in London by the police.
We'll see in our discussion of Naked Civil Servant. Police harassment of gay people is nothing new and has peaks and troughs of hideous periods. As we discussed in Victim, the 50s were the worst, but when the AIDS crisis kicks, it will kick off again. In 1972, the first British Gay Pride Rally is held in London, with an estimated 200 to 700 people marching from Trafalgar Square to Hyde Park. And the same year, Gay News, Britain's first gay newspaper, is founded. And when you look at the size of Pride these days, from this beginning in 1972, it's quite astonishing, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Really is. Yeah, okay, 1973, I can't quite believe I'm reading this, but 1973, homosexuality was declassified as a mental illness in the United Kingdom. Still, in 1973...
Yeah, it's seen as a mental illness, yeah. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know what? I just think we just really don't know how lucky we are.
We don't. That's the thing. It just gets accepted, which is all the other reasons why LGBTQ History Month is really important, because it shows where we've come from, where we need to go. In 1974, so the year before The Naked Civil Servant, in London, the first openly LGBT telephone helpline is opened, the Lesbian and Gay Switchboard, followed by one in Brighton in 1975. One of my PhD peers was doing a history of the switchboard.
Oh, really?
And its formation and stuff. And God, what a lifeline it was for people. Because although this is happening, wider society is still really homophobic, and it's still really difficult to be authentic and true if you're not in a city, even if you are in a city, but especially places like we came from. God, you must have felt so isolated. All those people having to get married just to, it was grim.
It doesn't just affect the individual who's gay and who's hiding their true feelings away, but it affects the people around them. Especially if you got married to a woman when you were hiding your true feelings, had children, it affects them, it affects their parents, it affects all the wider circle around you, which obviously adds to the pressure of being a homosexual in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. So that was little historical context to what was happening in society when The Naked Civil Servant is produced.
Let's take a deep dive into The Naked Civil Servant. Why don't you give us a little synopsis, Lee, as to what The Naked Civil Servant is about?
I will. Just to point out in this synopsis, I will use terminology which was appropriate at the time it was made. So, in the 1920s, a teenage Quentin Crisp is waking to the fact that he is not sexually attracted to women. After seeking medical help forced by his parents send him to art school in an effort to get him into society. There he befriends a female art student, and after meeting a transvestite sex worker, discovers the joys of makeup and decides to be proud of his homosexuality, although faces rejection from his closeted community and is regularly beaten up or verbally abused by wider society. After himself working as a sex worker, he becomes a commercial artist, a tap dance teacher, and then a nude art model. After being arrested for soliciting in London, the case is thrown out after his unabashed defence. Along the way, we meet his friends and lovers before the film flashes forward to contemporary 1975, where a reflective Quentin comments that the symbols he adopted to express his individuality have become the uniform of all young people. He reminisces over one night of perfect happiness and declares himself one of the stately homos of England.
Very good. So, The Naked Civil Servant, what did you feel of it in general?
It's basically a story of somebody who refuses to bow to what everybody else thinks and is unashamedly his authentic self. despite what everybody else thinks of him. And I found it a very moving piece of TV, and also one that's a story of courage and a story of everyone else can just go fuck yourselves.
Yes.
And I really, really loved it. There were parts which really triggered me, which we'll get to, I'm sure. And just a powerhouse performance by John Hurt. What did you...
All of the above. I felt it was triumphant, celebratory, resilient, unapologetic. You know, the way it was directed, the way it was written. There was no apology for the way this man chose to live his life, which I thought was great. You know, it started off in the 30s, so we're talking about almost 100 years ago now.
God, we are, Jesus.
Where, you know, homosexuality was absolutely frowned upon. It was illegal. It was, like you say, it was a mental illness. To be gay was worse than, I would say, being a murderer or a child molester.
Yes, and to be effeminately gay.
Yeah.
And to dress... He's not in full drag, but he always has his hair hennaed. He always got lippy on, nail varnish, strappy sandals, you know.
He found his style, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was very open from the start. I'm not a woman, I'm a man. But this is how I choose to dress, this is how I choose to present myself. And even though he was thrown so many curveballs, he was queer bashed, he was basically ostracised from his family, he was persecuted by the police, he was up in court. Never once did this film show Quentin Crisp regret his actions.
Yeah.
But also, I thought what was really interesting was he met adversity from other gay men.
Yes.
Who were very straight presenting. He went to this club, didn't he, which was for gay men.
Yeah.
But for very straight presenting gay men. So with all intents and purposes, the only thing gay about them was they liked to sleep with men.
Yeah.
They dressed straight, they behaved in a masculine way. You know, it's like what I was saying about modern day. You know, it seems to be, you know, the gay community has turned in on itself to a certain extent that if you present yourself as feminine, then there are a group of macho gays that...
Straight acting gays
that would have an issue with the way that you were presenting the gay way of life, so to
absolutely.
speak.
And certainly Crisp, along with Mr. Humphreys from Are You Being Served, is criticised in the 80s and 90s to some extent as gay culture takes that butt turn that I talked about in our cruising episode.
Yeah.
To be ostracised from wider society, fair enough, but this film was very careful in showing us that actually the ostracisation could also come from within your own community. He has his first boyfriend, Thumbnails, who doesn't want Quentin to look like a woman. When he's in that club scene, you're right, the other guys in that room are straight presenting, straight acting. I mean, the clue's in the name, straight acting, you know. And he's called a dead giveaway. He's not allowed to drink because he's spoiling it for the others. And basically, if the police came in, then the guy who's stopping Quentin says, well, we're all normal.
Yes.
Whereas you're not normal. And then Quentin says, you know, my appearance, when he's reflecting about this, sets me apart from all humanity. And so to be so isolated, apart from your group of friends, I mean, again, I was just struck by his refusal to tone it down. And why the fuck should he? What an amazing message that this film, and despite all of this, despite the constant physical abuse he gets, the verbal abuse, a woman slaps him on the street at one point just because of the way he looks, a guy stands on his foot, he gets beaten up.
Yeah.
To still carry on, it's just, wow.
It portrayed Quentin Crisp to be tremendously courageous.
Yes, it did. Also, I thought really well brought out that paranoia that gay men had, and some still unfortunately have to have, about being their true selves, about acknowledging their sexuality, which was still currency when we were kids.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
know? And still is currency in lots of places, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of vitriol aimed against him. Phrases like, oh, you're one of those, you're a pansy, you're a dirty, stinking little pansy. You know, the word pansy for me kind of brings a little bit of fear up in me from when I was a kid, because that's one of the words that was levelled against you as, you know, as early as being a child in the playground, that because you perhaps presented, you know, a slight effeminacy, then you were labelled as a pansy, a puff.
Yes, yeah.
You know, all those kind of things, even before you even knew what it
Yeah,
what it was, what it meant, and
yeah.
you know, why am I different to you? I can't see I'm behaving any differently to you, but it was just inherent in you.
Absolutely. And it speaks of the fact that there are no other representations of gay men in popular culture at that point. So the only gay people you saw were camp, effeminate men. There's nothing else with its benchmark. Today, it's so different. You know, I don't know if that effeminate thing still gets charged to people. No. I don't honestly know. But I remember going to my first gay club when I was 16, underage, shitting myself because I couldn't get in, and being so shocked in 1989 that not every single man in there was camp or effeminate, because all I'd seen of gay culture was the camp effeminate man. And you're right, I got triggered. There were some scenes in this that were just like, oh, but there's that horrible scene where he's approaching that group of roughs, he calls them, and he gets beaten up. And then later on he talks about the rules, and I'm sure you've got your rules. I've got my rules.
Yeah.
I still get very anxious if I walk into a pub that's full of straight men watching football. I will automatically adjust my body language.
Yeah.
I'll adjust the way I hold myself. I will try and keep my floppy wrists down. You know, and it's stupid. It's still... We're never going to get over that.
No.
Because that's the way we were brought up.
It's ingrained in us.
It's ingrained in us.
You know, you're walking down the street with your boyfriend or your husband.
Yeah.
There are certain areas that you wouldn't hold their hand.
I would never hold hand anyway in public. I couldn't do it. It would freak me out too much. I just convinced myself. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, homophobic attacks are on the rise again. So,
well, he talks about, you know, being followed by people, doesn't he? And he says, never turn around and look at them.
Yeah, never run.
Never run.
Yeah,
just keep looking forward.
Yeah.
Keep looking forward. Don't engage.
Yeah, if they do engage, be very polite.
Yes.
Yeah, offer money. Yeah,
let's go away. I mean, hideous.
Yeah.
When it first started, one of the very first shots was him trying on a dress in a mirror as a little boy. You know. And then there were scenes around the dinner table with his mum and dad, and his overbearing father was obviously disgusted with his son and made no attempts to hide his shame of his effeminate son.
Yeah.
And then it kind of moved forward to Quentin sort of finding his tribe in a way. He went to this night cafe and there were other men dressed as women.
Yes.
There were sex workers, some of them, but very much he found a way to be himself amongst like-minded people.
Yes.
Which I thought was really nice.
Yeah.
He finds his tribe, and then he kind of finds another tribe in, like, the liberated. It felt like, you know, the bright young things of the 20s, but obviously moved on to the 30s.
Yes.
So he calls it La Vie Bohème, the arts set, the arts crowd of the 1930s London, wasn't it? Including the glorious Patricia Hodge. Yes, as one of his landladies.
Yes.
And you could just see him flourishing, of being allowed to be the person he wanted to be amongst these people.
Yeah. And he constantly says, I'm an effeminate homosexual. By that stage, he's absolutely accepted what he is.
Also, the appearance of what I would say in inverted commas, fag hag. He inherited a fag hag. There was an actor called Jan Chappell.
My friend Jan.
Yes, you
know friend Jan, don't you?
Yeah. She played a lady who sort of fell in love with Quentin, didn't he? And he kind of made it very clear that, you know, nothing of a sexual nature would ever happen between them. And she said, I don't care. That's what I want. I just love you. I just love you. Bless her. Which I thought was a really early incarnation of the fag hag, wasn't it? I thought she was great.
This speaks a lot about the police harassment of gay men at the time. And he has several encounters with the police. He has two first is with the two uniformed policemen who are asking him, does he know you're a pansy, referring to some guy he's been chatting to. And the policeman tells him the only men who would go with Quentin, are one suffering from venereal disease because they'd be too ashamed to give it to a woman. It goes back to what we were saying earlier on about, you know, homosexuality decriminalised for men in private. Because you get this subplot of Quentin, when he's living with Patricia Hodge's character, he has a regular lover, very stiff, buttoned up civil servant. I think the camera made great pains to show this guy pulling on his sock suspenders, very tightly buttoned up, in contrast to like this free Quentin who's just like... But because Quentin's got his curtains open, the neighbours opposite have been able to see what's been going on and have called the police on him. And it could happen that if you were having sex with a man in your own bedroom or whatever, the police could come to the door and pull you out and arrest you for it.
And you could go to prison for 7 years.
Yeah, unbelievable. You know, as I said, in the 50s is when you get this real kind of persecution of gay men. But it's just unbelievable that that was still a thing that could happen to you. And as we later find out, even just chatting to a man on the street, you can get done for soliciting if you're clearly gay.
Yeah. Yeah, which happens to him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Police stop him asking for his papers, and then they see that he's homosexual because they say, why are you not in the army? And he presents his exemption papers, doesn't he?
Because the war's on by this point.
Yeah. And they basically harass him. They follow him around, and they kind of create lies about who he's talked to, who he's spoken to, kind of implying that he's been soliciting sex from these men.
Yeah.
It's quite blatantly a lie, but it goes as far as him having to go to court and defend himself.
Yeah.
He's invited to give a witness statement from where he stood, or if he can go into the witness box. But if he does go to the witness box and he's found to commit perjury, then he would go to prison. But he decides he will make a stand and go to the witness box. And he regales the truth, doesn't he, to the judge about what's happening. And the judge believes him over the police and acquits him.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. It just showed what kind of like a pioneer he was. He was unafraid to take a stand and say, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with what I do. It's the police who are victimising me. And he's believed for the first time, which I thought was a real breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk about the war? The Second World War takes place within the drama, and Quentin goes to the conscription office to try and become a soldier. Is refused, is told that men dyeing their hair is a sign of sexual perversion. They bring a psychiatrist in to see him, and Quentin rightly says, I'm more likely to be killed by the English than the Germans, which kind of a little hint of the physical abuse he gets. And he says, but I've lived with that all my life. I've written a chapter on a book about this. And it was amazing that if 2 years later Quentin had gone, he'd been signed up immediately. And there is a rich history of queer personnel within the army in the Second World War. Drag shows, the American president, I can't remember his name, I think it's Johnson, actually says that drag shows are a vital part of the war effort because they're good for morale. Some very openly effeminate soldiers become like regimental mascots, you know. There's a story of one guy doing his lippy while there's a German raid going on. He's like, I've got to look my best for the Germans, you know. And basically, as is the same with people of colour, when the war's on and the soldiers are needed, it doesn't matter. You know, all the arguments about group cohesion all go out the window because the necessity of war means that we just have to take everybody on. As soon as the war's done, pack your bags and get out. Yeah. And the war was just unbelievable because you get this massive mobilisation of people put into same-sex groups that you on such a huge scale before that hasn't happened before. So of course there were like same-sex encounters. It doesn't make a difference. And then we go into the blackout in this film, and the blackout was by all means a society where pretty much anything went.
Yes.
You know, not only does crime go up horrifically during the blackout, murders, robberies, you know, looting, violence, it really goes up. But also the chance for men like Quentin to have sex. And we see him have sex with GIs, but it was a boom time to be gay in London during the blackout.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it's one of the things, because the myths we have about the Second World War, which still hold such great sway, the Blitz spirit, all this stuff. At the very beginning of the war, Winston Churchill realises that he needs to have a strong narrative of a united Britain in order to keep everybody together.
Yeah.
After the war, that needs to be doubly reinforced because the country's fucked and crippled. So that's when you get these myths. So the myths of the Blitz spirit overlooks the soaring crime rate, the murders, but the sex everybody was having as well, the free and easy spirit. The myth of the Blitz spirit only says that people followed the rules, everybody was looking out for each other. It's all bullshit, you know. And even when Churchill visited the ruins, you'd often get heckled by people who'd lost their houses going, fuck off, you have no idea what it's like. But the myth building has to take place after the war.
Yeah, well, that myth exists today because I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
I just, again, like you say, know about the Blitz spirit and the romanticism of everyone pulling together in the war. Oh, what a lovely war. You know, none of this robbery, murder and buggery going on in the blackout.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even the Queen, who was the Queen Mum, some of their visits to the East End when it was bombed, people were just like, can you just fuck off already, please? We've lost everything.
Yeah.
You've got your big Buckingham Palace. So when Buckingham Palace is bombed, the Queen says, oh, now we can look the East End people in the face, even though she's just lost a conservatory.
Yes. Oh dear. Okay, let's move swiftly on. Okay, let's just jump to the very, very end, which I thought was really poignant. The final scene, which is him. He's saying he took a trip to the seaside. Was it Brighton?
He's reminiscing, isn't he?
Yeah.
At this point, yeah. Because we now jump forward to 1975.
Yeah. So he's reminiscing about the only time in his life where he felt the centre of attention without feeling danger.
Yeah.
Which I felt was really poignant. Is when he's looking out to sea over the railings and a group of sailors come past and start chatting to him. And I thought it was a direct contrast to when he was beaten up in the East End of London, when these bother boys came up to him and basically just toyed with him like he was a cat and mouse.
Yeah.
But then we jump to this scene with the sailors and they openly embrace him. He's dressed in all his, feminine finery, and they embrace him. They just see him as a fellow human being who they can have a little bit of fun chatting to and bantering with.
Yeah.
And you can see the way John Hurt performs it. Quentin revels in this, and you can just think, so poignant that it really encapsulated that all through his life, even though he wanted to be and presented who he wanted to be, there was always that element of danger. And it was the moments where he just was able to be fully himself and feel happy were really, really limited.
Yeah. That really resonated with me as well, because it's, I'd say probably 70 or 8%, 80% of my life is like that still.
It's still inherent in us, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That feeling of...
A fear of being authentic, and a fear of just watching out and having to ascertain that you're in a safe space,
Yeah.
And even then, sometimes being in a safe space, you're not necessarily in a safe space. I remember getting homophobic abuse in gay clubs back in the day by straight men who'd got in there,
Yeah, it's always there. I think I've become less guarded as I've got older. I'm kind of veering to the point where I don't really give a shit anymore.
Yes.
But there is that, if you go into your local pub, you have a really nice time and, people are just accepting, and somebody can just say one tiny little thing.
Absolutely.
That they might not even perceive to be homophobic, or it's not a dig at you, but
it just...
the vocabulary they use, it just goes... whoosh.
Yes, straight back up. Straight back up. Yeah.
So I don't think you're right. It never leaves you.
No, it's a shadow that a lot of queer people have to carry, isn't it, around with them? Yeah, it's horrible.
Definitely.
And I hate it. It's one of our crosses we have to bear.
Overall, it's a fantastic piece of television. The design of it was amazing. The costumes, the art direction, the acting. Was spot on. Really high caliber cast. Everyone at the top of their game. And, just being led by this performance by John Hurt. I just feel like he just must have studied Quentin Crisp and studied the community and studied gay people who, did like to dress as women.
Yeah. And he was with Quentin Crisp. They met a lot. And there's some great photos of him as Quentin Crisp with Quentin Crisp, when they were filming it. So he got to know him quite well, I think. Yeah,
I just thought his mannerisms were great and consistent throughout the whole thing. Yeah. The way he carried himself, his whole deportment, his voice. You just believed him, this person as a human being, didn't
Absolutely, you? I think this makes John Hurt into a household name as well. Really? He's done I, Claudius. He's a great Caligula in I, Claudius. But I think this is the one that really propels him into superstardom. Yeah,
well, won the BAFTA for it. Yes. And then a few years later, an alien's bursting out of his chest.
Yeah, and another iconic moment.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't got much else to say, but one final thing, actually two final things. I love that the end when he ends up in modern day Britain, which is 1975 at the time, and he rightly says that all the symbols he used to wear, the clothes that he would wear in order to symbolise something, have now just become part and parcel of fashion. Long hair on men, bell-bottom trousers, and that scene where he is as a little boy in front of the mirror with one of his mum's dresses on. I was that little boy, and I was really like, oh God, but it was either that or a Darth Vader mask.
Yeah.
Possibly at the same time.
Yeah. I remember I went to my mum's closet and put on a dress, twirled around in it a few times, and then thought, no, this isn't for me. Put it back. That's the only time I'd ever kind of experimented with women's clothes and stuff.
Right.
I'm not saying I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Just saying, isn't it strange
that
there was
wasn't for you.
for somebody, for two different people, one enjoys embracing femininity and the other one just kind of looks and thinks, oh no, that isn't doing it for me.
Yeah. And for me, it was a through line to making my own Leela from Doctor Who outfit, dressing up as Alexis Carrington with one of my Nana's bras on, with some toilet paper shoved down it and toilet paper for shoulder pads, all of this going right the way through. And one final point, which we really need to talk about, is how much this must have blown fucking people's minds to see men in bed together and kissing each other. I mean, you don't see Quentin kissing somebody apart from the Polish guy at the end when he gets just full kiss on the lips, but that must have just been incredible.
Particularly that, anything they'd seen before that would probably have derided them, or they would have been punished for it, or it's being portrayed in a negative light.
Yeah. Well,
certainly not loving.
No, absolutely. And you wouldn't have seen it. You wouldn't have seen the loving relationship between men. You would only have seen Mr. Humphreys or Dick Emery. There are lots of gay characters who appear as one-offs in TV dramas, but invariably they will have a neck scarf on. They'll be effeminate, So what's your score for this then?
I would give it 8 sexy sailors out of 10.
Right. I'm going to give it 9 bottles of henna out of 10.
Well worth a watch, wasn't it?
Well worth a watch. I'm pleased we did. Yeah. So if you want to watch something which speaks of the adversity, the difficulties, what it's like to be marginalised, what it's like to be ostracised by society, and what that experience is like, then I think this is a great window into that, but also a message of pride and optimism and
hope.
I got quite emotional there.
Oh, yeah. It's good. I would recommend anybody to watch this who maybe has a son or a daughter who you can see is struggling a little bit. Yeah. Or if you've ever had an uncle or, a distant relative who was perhaps a little different back in the day, and you watched them and you couldn't quite put your finger on what was different about them, or you felt like they couldn't fully express themselves, then I recommend you watch this film, because in these troubling times, it can really teach us a lot.
Yes. Well said.
Bravo. I love you, kid. I love you for Lord Deji Barlow now. Oh, I love you. So, that was The Naked Civil Servant. What are we going to be talking about next week? Next week, we have a special episode, Dave. Because we're taking the Teletardis not back to one particular year, but we're going to be hopping around the decades like never before on the Problematic Gaze. Because next week are the Brit Awards. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the controversial moments and eye-popping moments of the Brit Awards from the last 30-odd years to see what they can tell us about what was happening in society and culture then. And what was happening in society and culture now, etc., etc. That's exciting, isn't it? It really is. Yeah. It really is. Now, it's not just going to be Madonna falling down the stairs, is it? Because I need to prepare myself for that. It's not. Fine. It's not. Please tell me there's a smattering of friend of the podcast, Sam Fox, in there. There is. There will be, yes. Okay. Yeah. There's a couple of unexpected treats you might not be... oh, really? But I think it's going to be quite fun. Yes. And we're going to watch them live together as we record, aren't we? We are. We can then just give our hot takes on them. Yes. Yeah. Just to warm ourselves up for the actual Brit Awards. Which we clearly won't be watching. Far too old for that shit now. Far too old. Well, I think if you record it, then you can fast forward for all the crap bits, i.e. all the songs. Oh, yeah. Not my kind of day. Who's that? Who is it? Who's that? Oh, it all sounds the same. Oh, it's not like back in my day. Oh, she's no Jerry Halliwell, is she? No, she's not, no. Yes, I look forward to that. Right, I'm off to get my slingbacks on and go down the docks, darling. What are you up to? I'm off to go and do my nude modelling in the art class. Well, enjoy. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just get all my scarf off. Oh, keep your boobs in. Yeah. Keep your boobs in. Oh, don't sorry, yeah. Spilt out then. Popped out then. Sorry. Didn't mean to put you in the eye. Till next week. Till next week. Adios. Adios. Au revoir. Au reservoir. Goodbye, darling. Goodbye.